I'm joined now by Congressman Jamie Raskin. And the reason this matters is not just because of one scandal or one news cycle, but because we are watching in real time how a political movement handles evidence of serious misconduct at the very top. On one side, you have new emails tying Donald Trump more directly to Jeffrey Epstein's $1.5 billion sex trafficking operation. On the other, you have a House Speaker who shut down Congress for weeks and a Senate Republican caucus that quietly inserted a self-enrichment provision into a must-pass funding bill. Taken together, this is not random chaos. It is a pattern. Delay accountability, protect the leader, reward insiders, and send the bill to the American people. That's the frame for this conversation. What these Epstein emails show what the shutdown was really doing and how Republicans in the Senate are now writing themselves million-dollar checks as compensation for being lawfully investigated. The immediate breaking news is stark. A new trove of emails from the Epstein estate has been turned over to the House Oversight Committee. Those emails, released by the Democratic members, show that Jeffrey Epstein repeatedly referenced Donald Trump, described him as someone who clearly knew what was going on, and even called him the dog who didn't bark yet, meaning the person who had not yet revealed what he knew. The correspondence suggests that Trump spent several hours alone with one of Epstein's victims, a girl swept up in the sex trafficking ring. Epstein himself described Trump as his best friend for more than a decade. In that light, it is simply not credible to maintain that Trump was unaware of the nature of Epstein's operation. These emails do not exist in a vacuum. They confirm what many people's intuition had already told them. Trump was not a distant acquaintance. He was embedded in the social and operational culture that surrounded Epstein. And this new evidence appears at the exact moment when the House has been kept closed for nearly 2 months. Just when once Representative Adelita Grijalva is sworn in, there will be 218 votes to discharge the petition to release the full Epstein files. The timing is not accidental. It is protective. This is where the shutdown itself comes into focus. For weeks, Speaker Mike Johnson and the MAGA majority insisted that the closure was about spending, about fiscal restraint, about standing up for taxpayers. But when you look at what was actually being blocked, a second purpose becomes obvious. On one level, the shutdown functions as a top-down class war against the American working and middle class. It puts at risk SNAP food benefits and basic nutrition for families. It jeopardizes healthcare access for millions. It disrupts the work of cancer researchers, food and drug inspectors, air traffic controllers, and the broader federal workforce. All that fits neatly within a long-standing ideological goal of dismantling the federal state. On another level, the shutdown delays a reckoning with Trump's involvement in Epstein's trafficking ring. Once the House is back in full operation, and once the discharge petition on the Epstein files can be executed, these kinds of emails, the ones we are now seeing, are exactly what will spill out. The shutdown, therefore, functions as both a policy weapon against ordinary Americans and a procedural shield for the former president. It also exposes profound hypocrisy within Trump's inner circle. Many of his closest aides and media allies built entire brands on demanding the release of the Epstein files and accusing a deep state of hiding the truth. They pushed the narrative that where there is smoke, there must be fire. Now, faced with fire that points directly back toward Trump, they are silent or actively complicit in delaying disclosure. Legally, the Epstein emails raise questions on several fronts. They strengthen the case that Trump had knowledge of and proximity to a global child sex trafficking scheme. They indicate direct contact with at least one victim. They call into question prior claims of ignorance. This does not automatically translate into criminal charges, but it does meet the threshold for serious investigation and, at minimum, full public transparency. At the same time, another legal issue has emerged from a completely different angle, a provision quietly inserted by Republican senators into the continuing resolution funding the government. This is not a generic reform to surveillance or privacy law. It is a highly specific midnight rider written to benefit exactly 8 Republican senators who themselves voted for it. The provision targets a precise fact pattern. Those 8 senators had their phone records subpoenaed by a grand jury investigating January 6th. Under long-standing law, grand juries have the power to obtain phone records relevant to criminal inquiries. These are not wiretaps. They are call detail records, who called whom. And when used to reconstruct the chronology of events. Instead of proposing a general civil liberties reform limiting all such subpoenas, these senators crafted a special rule just for themselves and their colleagues. Under the new language, no one may obtain the phone records of a senator without personally notifying that senator. If that notification does not occur, the senator can sue for $500,000 for the alleged violation and another $500,000 for the non-disclosure order. Those figures are floors, not ceilings. In practice, each of the 8 can seek at least $1 million from the federal government and potentially far more. This raises at least 3 legal problems. Conflict of interest rules in the Senate itself, which bar members from voting on legislation that directly and uniquely enriches them. The basic principle that Congress cannot simply award itself immediate financial gain in the middle of a term, and the equal protection concern of creating a special procedural right in criminal investigations that exists only for 100 senators and not for any other citizen or even members of the House. When you step back, a clear mechanism emerges. MAGA leaders are using institutional levers, shutdowns, riders, inside procedural maneuvers, not to strengthen oversight or protect the public, but to delay accountability and secure personal advantage. The House shutdown buys time. Time to avoid releasing Epstein-related documents that implicate Trump. Time to wage a policy war against healthcare, food assistance, and the federal workforce. The Senate writer rewrites the rules so that when grand juries come calling, senators implicated in January 6 have a unique shield and a built-in payday. Overlay that with Trump's own conduct, a long pattern of projection and deflection. He amplified QAnon fantasies about global trafficking rings, not because they were grounded in evidence, but because he understood psychologically and politically that if he got people to believe elites were abusing vulnerable girls, he could point that anger away from himself. He weaponized projection as legal strategy, accused others of the very thing that poses the greatest danger to you. In that sense, the system mechanism is coherent. Use shutdowns to weaken the state, use disinformation to redirect outrage, use writers to protect insiders, use delay to blunt investigations, all while claiming to act for forgotten men and women who, in practice, bear the brunt of the damage. Inside the Republican Party, the conflict is no longer simply between pro-Trump and anti-Trump factions. It is between those willing to accept open corruption as the price of power and those who, for various reasons, are beginning to resist. On the Epstein files, 4 Republicans, Thomas Massie, Ro Khanna's co-sponsor from the other side, Nancy Mace, Lauren Boebert, and Marjorie Taylor Greene, joined the push to force disclosure. Greene, in particular, has become unusually outspoken. She has criticized the administration not only for stonewalling on Epstein, but for leaving millions exposed to unaffordable health insurance premiums after months of rate hikes that hit her own family directly. In her case, the break may also be personal. After years of total loyalty to the MAGA program, she was bypassed for a Senate seat in favor of a good old boy candidate. And suddenly we are seeing what Congressman Raskin calls Marjorie Taylor Greene unplugged. Yet even among House Republicans who privately objected to the Senate writer, the public vote tells the story. When Raskin and Congresswoman Teresa Laguerre Fernandez brought forward amendments to strip the provision, Republicans closed ranks. They blocked a vote on the merits and unanimously advanced the continuing resolution with the corrupt clause intact. A few voiced concern. None were willing to confront their colleagues in the Senate in a way that might carry consequences. There's the internal conflict. Isolated acts of dissent on narrow questions versus a broader institutional habit of protecting the collective project, even when it crosses clear ethical and constitutional lines. The situation escalates on multiple fronts. Substantively, the Epstein emails deepen the moral gravity of Trump's record. They do not merely hint at social proximity. They describe hours spent alone with a victim inside $1.5 billion trafficking ring. That would be troubling for any private citizen. For a former president and current candidate, it is an alarm bell. Procedurally, the Senate writer escalates the breakdown of equal treatment under law. It codifies the idea that senators are not just politically powerful, but legally distinct, that they deserve advance warning when investigators seek their phone records, and that any failure to provide that warning is a 7-figure injury to be compensated by taxpayers. Politically, the refusal of House Republicans to remove the clause, even after it was exposed, sends a message. The caucus will tolerate self-enrichment and structural privilege as long as it is wrapped inside a larger partisan bargain. Rask compared it to the Roman Senate under emperors like Julius Caesar or Caligula. Legislators focused less on governing a republic and more on converting their position into private gain. Meanwhile, on the ground, the shutdown's consequences are not theoretical. Families lose SNAP benefits, federal workers face lost income, cancer research slows, safety inspections lapse, air traffic controllers and other critical personnel are stretched or furloughed. The same party that repeatedly asks, how are we going to pay for this, quietly endorses a $1 million bonus structure for 8 senators and supports a former president who now seeks hundreds of millions in reimbursement from the Department of Justice. Follow the money is not a slogan here, it is an organizing principle. When you track where public funds and legal privileges are directed, a consistent picture appears. Donald Trump has long treated public office and public attention as opportunities for personal gain. A new ballroom at staggering cost. Private jets, including a Qatari aircraft whose retrofits reportedly pushed its total value toward $1 billion, Gulfstream planes, lavish decor, and a lifestyle modeled more on oligarchs than on public servants. He markets himself as the defender of workers while pursuing crypto deals and luxury assets that benefit only him and his inner circle. Now, 8 Republican senators are poised to receive at least $1 million each as a remedy for having had their phone records subpoenaed in a lawful grand jury investigation of January 6. Those subpoenas were not political stunts. They were standard tools used in probing hundreds of crimes that have already produced convictions. Instead of defending the integrity of that process, these senators drafted a provision that retroactively converts investigative steps into financial liabilities to be paid by the very public whose democracy was attacked that day. Layer on top of that, Trump's push for the Department of Justice to compensate him for the costs of investigating his own conduct. In effect, he seeks to transform accountability into revenue, turning criminal and civil probes into opportunities to build a government. In both cases, the direction of movement is the same. From public resources to private enrichment, justified by status, cloaked in legal language, and insulated by partisan solidarity. This matters because it goes to the core question of whether the United States remains a nation of laws or drifts into a system where law is selectively applied and structurally tilted in favor of a political elite. If Donald Trump can be this closely tied to a global sex trafficking operation and still avoid full transparency, it signals to future leaders that proximity to criminal enterprise can be managed through procedural obstruction and disinformation. If senators can write themselves special protections against grand jury subpoenas and millionaire payouts for lawful investigations, it signals that federal office is a pathway to legal immunity and financial reward. For ordinary Americans, the contrast is stark. Grand juries do not offer them advance notice before subpoenaing their phone records. They do not receive $500,000 for each alleged violation of privacy. They do not have the option of shutting down the government to delay embarrassing disclosures. At the same time, they are the ones who lose health coverage when shutdowns drag on, who struggle when SNAP is cut off, whose safety is put at risk when inspections and federal functions stop. The self-image of the modern Republican Party as defenders of regular people worried about rent, groceries, housing, and medical bills collides directly with this reality. You cannot credibly claim to stand with working families while writing legislation to pay yourself 7-figure sums and delaying the release of documents about your party leader's connection to a child sex trafficking ring. The United States now stands at a crossroads, defined less by traditional left-right debates than by a more fundamental choice: equal accountability or entrenched privilege. On one path, Congress strips out corrupt writers, rejects self-enrichment schemes, and accepts that grand juries must be free to investigate everyone, including senators, under the same rules that apply to ordinary citizens. The House resumes full operation, releases the Epstein files, and treats the evidence wherever it leads as a matter of law, not personal loyalty. Public policy debates continue, but they are anchored in a shared baseline. No one is above the law. On the other path, shutdowns continue to be used as shields for powerful figures. Special clauses multiply that place members of Congress beyond the reach of normal criminal procedure. Leaders project their own misconduct onto fabricated enemies, using conspiracy narratives to distract from very real, documented wrongdoing. The government increasingly resembles the Roman Senate at its worst, a stage for self-protection and self-enrichment, while the public is told to tighten their belts. The choice is not theoretical. Every vote to maintain the Senate rider, every decision to block the Epstein files, every refusal to confront this corruption pushes the system further down the second path. For anyone watching this who cares about the rule of law, the next steps are quiet but concrete. Stay informed about what these provisions actually do, not just the talking points around them. Pay attention to which members of Congress are willing to oppose self-dealing and which are not. Support efforts to release the Epstein files in full and to restore a single standard for criminal investigations, whether the subject is a private citizen, a senator, or a former president. Democracy does not defend itself. It depends on citizens who understand the stakes and insist that institutions serve the public, not the powerful. The emails are now public.